In Haiti, shootings and riots by armed gangs terrorized people in surrounding neighborhoods of the Caribbean country's capital, Port-au-Prince. In Palestine, authorities stressed that several people were killed after new Israeli bombardments in the framework of 105 days at the beginning of the total Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. In Germany, vehicles blocked roads for the second time this week as truck drivers held protests on Wednesday. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Rosabal from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Haiti, shootings and riots by armed gangs terrorized people in several neighborhoods of the Caribbean country's capital, Port-au-Prince. The Balearic criminal gang led the main acts of extreme violence, including setting fire to the homes of residents who fled to avoid being consumed by the flames. The neighborhood of Delmas, Croix de Bouquet, Carrefour, PN, and Solinos were the main hotspots of the day's conflict, where gunfire and burning took place. Recently, Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry warned that sowing chaos among the population is not a valid option to gain power in the country.
We asked the entire metropolitan area to rise up. The whole republic must rise up to make the Prime Minister respond. We can no longer resist the insecurity of the gangs. Nothing is working. The democratic institution, we want gang-free elections. The head of state is now involved in gangs. The whole country is now gang-land.
In Colombia, concluding on Thursday the third cycle of the negotiations at a peace talks between the national government and the Central General Staff of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombian Army, or the people known as FARC-EP. In return, the delegation signed a fifth agreement which establishes a ceasefire until July 15, which may be extended again. Likewise, the path of social participation, socio-environmental commitments, territorial transformations, and humanitarian, legal, and security aspects was also established. At the same time, they affirmed that they will put an end to the pressure retention for economic purposes while the ceasefire lasts. For his part, the head of the government negotiation delegation, Camilo González, stated that the agreement set the installation of 22 local civil mechanisms aiming to reduce violence in their territories.
We had positive results in this third cycle of the peace talks because on one hand we received the report of the verification mechanism, which is very important. It gives an account of what has happened in terms of violation or prevention since September and has allowed us to trace a way to prevent new events, to install 22 local mechanisms to monitor and protect, aiming at helping to protect the population. Respect for the civilian population is always present. We are alert and the commitment is to reduce violence in all the territories where the Central General Staff of the FARC-EP is present and in the midst of these conflicts.
In Mexico, the presidential candidate of the ruling coalition, Let's Keep Making History, Claudia Sheinbaum, presented her campaign closing at the Plaza de la República. Sheinbaum stated that the movement she leads is the only one that can guarantee the well-being of the population. She also stressed that she supports a project for the future of the nation that vindicates democracy, liberty, and the rights of the people of Mexico to a dignified life, as well as the rights of Native people and women. Regarding the 40 projects led by President López Obrador, he insisted it represents a humanist work in which businessmen, middle classes of religion, and freethinkers can fit. She also pledged to maintain social programs like pensions for senior citizens, scholarships, and other support.
Rest assured that I will rise to the occasion, that I will not let you down. We are setting an example to the world, and we will continue to do so.
The Panama Canal faces economic losses of up to $700 million as a result of water shortages generated by the drought. A severe drought that began last year has forced authorities to slash ship crossing by 36% in the Panama Canal, one of the world's most important trade routes. The administrator of the Canal Authority, Ricardo Vasquez, estimated a possible reduction of $500 and $700 million in revenue after the decrease in maritime traffic, which compared to the previous year was reduced by 20%. The waterway stopped receiving $100 million per month in tolls with respect to the year 2023. According to records, the Panama Canal watershed is the lowest level in history, facing the El Niño phenomenon and being forced to regulate the river traffic.
This problem of drought is a global problem. The Mississippi, the Rhine, the Amazon, the Yangtze, practically all the world's waterways are affected, and of course, we have been saying this for several years now. The Panama Canal has a fundamental disadvantage, and it is only global sea route in the world that operates on fresh water.
Let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you find news in different formats, new days, and more. Our story is coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Palestinian authorities stressed on Friday that several people were killed after new Israeli bombardments in the framework of 105 days at the beginning of the total Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. They added that rescue teams are working to recover the bodies of at least 4 people killed in an Israeli attack on a house belonging to the Al-Gharimi family in the western neighborhood of Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, the occupation forces of Tel Aviv continue their heavy artillery shelling around the Al-Mahal hospital in the city. In addition, local media reported that the communications blackouts affecting the entire Gaza Strip have reached its 8th day and is the longest since the beginning of the Israeli offensive on the Palestinian enclave. On the other hand, also local media in Palestine announced that local wounded by the Israeli airstrikes were transferred to the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, while the occupation army kept launching attacks in the vicinity amid operation of health workers. According to medical sources, about 100 civilians were killed and dozens wounded in the last 24 hours. Since last October 7th, the genocide perpetrated by Israel in the Gaza Strip has claimed the lives of 24,620 people, most of them women and children, in addition to leaving more than 60,000 wounded and thousands of people missing under the rubble. Palestinian authorities announced on Friday the assassination of another journalist after an Israeli bombardment in the city of Gaza. The Gaza government informed Information Office in a communique condemned the death of Wael Abu Fanuna, Director General of the Al-Quds Al-Yum satellite channel. This brings to 119 the number of journalists killed by Israeli in the Gaza Strip since October 7th. On the other hand, the Union of Palestinian Journalists alerted that 25 members of the union residing in Gaza need urgent medical treatment abroad. In this sense, the union urged the international community to put pressure on the government of Benjamin Netanyahu for him to facilitate the departure of these professionals. It should be noted that the Israeli occupation army has launched attacks on some 15 media outlets, including the offices of Al Jazeera, Palestine TV, the main news agencies, as well as the Al-Quds and Al-Jimi newspapers. Early on Friday, Israeli forces withdrew from the West Bank refugee camp of Tukaremp, leaving behind damaged buildings and rubble in the streets. Residents pick up the debris from damaged houses scattered in the streets, while essential services such as water and electricity were also collapsed. Local residents expressed their anguish and frustration at the destruction left by departing forces. The Israeli army has raided several locations in the Tulkarm refugee camp, and in a post on X, formerly Twitter, Israel called its military operations anti-terrorist actions in the camp and that armed Hamas fighters were still at large. The West Bank is another example of the violation of human rights in Palestine. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reported that the Zionist forces have killed 377 Palestinians in the West Bank since the beginning of the armed conflict. Israel Minister of National Security suggested the Israeli military will occupy Gaza after the current war ended and supported the idea of immigration plan for Palestinians to leave the territory. In an interview with Israel Channel 13 on Wednesday, Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said the Israeli Defense Forces will now leave city centers in Gaza once the fighting has stopped. Ben-Gvir continued to say it will be practical to impose a plan which would see Palestinians leave the enclave through voluntary encouragement. Thousands of Yemenis demonstrated on Friday in Sana'a, the nation's capital, in a sign of solidarity with Palestine and rejection of the attacks by the U.S. and its NATO allies. Mobilizations in Yemeni favor of the Palestinian cause have been held almost every Friday since October 7th, and now in addition to the recent attacks by Western forces and other nations. In turn, the armed forces of the Ansar Allah movement materialized actions on vessels operating in the Red Sea to prevent the crossing of Israeli ships or those vessels bound for the ports. In this sense, the U.S., under the pretext of securing international maritime navigation, launched together with the U.K. attacks against several governorates of Yemen. In this regard, the Secretary General of Hezbollah emphasized that the security of the Red Sea, the calm of the Lebanon front, and the situation in Iran depend on the end of the genocide in Gaza. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed on Thursday his deep concern over the recent exchange of military strikes between Iran and Pakistan, which have reportedly caused casualties on both sides. Through his spokesman, Stephane Dujarric, the UN chief urged both countries to exercise maximum restraint to avoid further escalation of tensions. The Secretary General underlined that all security concerns between the two countries must be addressed by peaceful means through dialogue and cooperation in accordance with the principle of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and good neighborly relations. Early Thursday morning, Pakistan carried out strikes against what it called terrorist hideouts inside Iran. The Pakistani actions followed Iranian attacks on what Tehran called terrorist bases in Pakistan's Balochistan province on Tuesday.
He's very concerned about this about the exchange of fire, of rockets between Iran and Pakistan. We've seen reports of casualties on both sides. Again, he urges both countries to exercise maximum restraint, avoid any further escalation. Any security issues, any issues, concerns between Iran and Pakistan must be addressed through peaceful means, through dialogue, through cooperation, and again, in accordance with the principles of sovereignty, national integrity, and good neighborly relations. I mean, we are seeing heightened tensions grow in that region, and that is something that is of worry.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Find out your break, don't go away. Welcome back. And this Friday in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, the 19th Summit of Delegates, head of states and governments of the non-aligned movement kicked off. During the meeting, the Vice President of Cuba, Salvador Valdez, asked the organization to take actions to demand the self-determination of Palestine and to achieve a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The meeting of the non-aligned countries will be held until Saturday, January 20. The non-aligned movement is made up of 120 countries and seeks to address international issues such as food insecurity, migration and employment, health, pandemics, the climate crisis, and terrorism. Prior to her summit, the Vice President of Cuba, Salvador Valdez, held a meeting on Thursday, met with the head of state of Uganda. In this regard, he wrote on social networks that the dialogue with the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni was very pleasant. Cuban Vice President also added they remembered the legacy of Fidel Castro and his footprints in Africa. In this regard, Salvador Valdez thanked Uganda for his support to Cuba in several areas and reiterated the nations agreed on the willingness to strengthen cooperation ties. The United Nations joins the government of Zimbabwe and humanitarian agencies to provide food aid to more than 2.7 million people in the African country. The United Nations World Food Programme reported that food shortages that put 20% of Zimbabweans at risk of famine are caused by the El Niño weather phenomenon and the drought crisis in southern Africa. The UN entity's director in Harare, Francesca Element, said weather conditions are expected to worsen in the coming months, causing crop failures in areas that depend on agriculture. The government announced that the country has grain reserves until at least October 2024, but acknowledged that many people have not been able to harvest enough grain or buy from popular markets due to extreme poverty. Thousands of people rallied across Slovakia on Thursday as protest intensifies against the plan by the new government of Prime Minister Roberto Fico to amend the country's penal code. The protest occurred a day after the European Parliament questioned Slovakia's ability to fight corruption and protect the European Union budget if its changes are adopted. The plan approved by Fico's coalition government includes abolishing the Special Prosecutor's Office, which handled serious crimes such as graft, organized crime, and extremism. Those cases will be taken over by prosecutors in regional offices which haven't dealt with such crime for 20 years. The plan changes also include a reduction in punishment for corruption and some other crimes, including the possibility of suspended sentences and significant shortening of the statute of limitations. In Berlin, Germany, vehicles blocked roads for the second time this week as truck drivers held protests on Friday. The week began and ended with a long queue of vehicles on the road in front of the landmark Brandenburg Gate, with drivers tooting their horns in protest and Farmers First on Monday and truckers on Friday. Government plans have included increasing taxes for farming solutions and cutting subsidy for agricultural products. Farm workers expressed they would prefer not to rely on subsidies, but warned that without them, many will lose their trades and Germany will have to increase its volume of imports. After previous protests in Berlin in December, the government watered down plans to cut subsidy for diesel in farmyard vehicles, but lobby groups are calling for them to scrap them entirely.
It's like the farmers. The barrel hasn't just overflowed, it exploded. The toll increase affects the entire population. It's not just the transport and logistics industry, it's everything that affects the population. 85% more tolls, and most of that goes to the German railroad company, which means basic food, medicines, everything will be more expensive, everything that is transported. And if that's not a reason to take the streets, then I can't think of anything else.
On Wednesday, lawmakers in the United Kingdom passed a bill to report immigrants to Rwanda. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's bill was approved by 300 votes in favor and 276 against after the Supreme Court rejected the original initiative in November. A total of 60 conservative MPs supported amendments to the new bill, one of which will allow it to circumvent order from the European Court of Human Rights. Under the government's initiative, immigrants who enter British soil illegally could be deported to Rwanda. Human rights groups have criticized the plan as inhumane and unworkable. And it should be noted that after being challenged in British courts, the UK Supreme Court ruled in November that the policy was illegal because Rwanda isn't a safe country for refugees. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the country's armed forces attacked foreign mercenary sites in Ukraine. The Russian agency said in a statement that the troops used rockets, artillery, as well as offensive drones to attack two of the main points of temporary deployment of foreign mercenaries. It also indicated that the Russian troops also attacked at least 4 missile depots and 117 artillery units of the Ukrainian army. The ministry also detailed that in 24 hours, the Russian army destroyed 2 Tusha-U tactical missiles, 1 JDAM-guided aerial bomb, and at least 18 HIMARS rockets of U.S. manufacture. After the destruction of a temporary deployment point of foreign mercenaries in Kharkov, the Russian Foreign Minister summoned the French ambassador in Moscow, since according to the ministry's spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, there were dozens of French among the mercenaries. The Russian Ministry of Defense informed that the building where the mercenaries were staying was completely destroyed, and that more than 60 people died and more than 20 were taken to medical centers. Turkey's first astronaut traveled to the International Space Station on Thursday, along with a Sweden and Italian, as part of the third private crew invited by NASA. The Falcon rocket blasted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in late Thursday afternoon, carrying the 4-member crew, which includes all the retired NASA astronauts who now works as escort for the company that arranged the flights. Their capsule should reach the space station Saturday, and they are scheduled to spend 2 weeks performing experiments, shutting up school children, and soaking in the views of Earth before returning home. The project is reportedly costing each of the 3 countries $55 million or more, a rough per person price of the mission organized by the Houston company Asian Space. And we have come to the end of this brief, but you can find these and many other stories on the website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Ana Rosabal. Thank you for watching.